Claire Brown is an economics professor at UC Berkeley, where she teaches Buddhist economics. I can't tell you how happy I know that that even exists. To undergrads in development engineering to graduate students, her work focuses on creating sustainable economy that supports a meaningful life for all people. Her research teams focus on evaluating economic performance for California and for global economies, and on analyzing the financial risk of holding fossil fuel assets. Claire works with Fossil Free California and 350 Bay Area, where she focused her lobbying on passing SB 100, Governor signed yesterday, right? And SB 964 this session. Please welcome Claire Brown.
Can we create an economy that cares for both the human spirit and our planet Earth, with well-being and happiness for all people? Our materialistic and wasteful carbon-based economy has created enormous inequality. The rich lead lavish lifestyles, while billions of others suffer in poverty. Our relentless consumption has plundered the environment and sickened the Earth. Yet we remain stubbornly obsessed with free market economics. At the heart of free market economics are three false beliefs about humans and the world we live in. 1. People are self-centered, caring only about themselves. 2. People are chasing after income to support fancy lifestyles. And 3. The environment exists for human domination. It's clear our economic focus on increasing income and consumption just isn't working. Is there a different model? Yes. Buddhist economics is based on three truths. 1. Human nature is kind and altruistic. 2. People are interdependent with each other. And 3. People are interdependent with nature. We can escape the cycle of disappointment and despair that comes from endlessly chasing after money, from always wanting more and more. We can use awareness to enjoy life to the fullest without relying on consumerism. In Buddhist economics, economic performance means delivering well-being to everyone, not just delivering more income to the rich. When the rich have even more income, they buy bigger mansions and yachts and travel to more exotic places. When low-income families have more money, they live healthier, more fulfilling lives. Society becomes better off when we reduce status consumption by the wealthy and increase basic consumption by those at the bottom. Buddhist economics shows us how to get off the materialistic treadmill and focus on the things that are important to us, living mindfully and caring for Mother Earth and each other.
One of the big messages that I have as an economist from a systems approach is that the whole message today, which we heard in great detail where we could really do it, is that in fact we have to all work together on two levels. We have to work individually to decide how we can use our resources to stop supporting fossil fuel and to create a clean energy and equitable economy. And one of the slides I wanted to show you is that the problems of inequality and the problems of fossil fuel emissions go together. And so that 10% of the richest people in the country, and not in the country, I'm sorry, in the world, and we're all in that 10%, we emit 50% of the carbon emissions. This is from an Oxfam report. The bottom 50% of people around the world are responsible for 10% of the carbon emissions. So inequality and carbon emissions go together. And those are our two biggest economic problems. So now is the time for us to really create and completely restructure the economy so that we create an economy that's sustainable and where we're caring for people and people's well-being. And we can do that. And today we're starting to talk about how we can do it as individuals and then how we can do it at the community level. And you can extend that out to policies. Economists know all the policies that help us reduce inequality and share prosperity. We've known them for decades. Not that we're politically doing them, but we know them. And we have bits and pieces around the world where it's happening, but we all need to come together and make it happen. We need the political will to reduce the inequality and share prosperity. And we also know how to reduce carbon emissions. We have all of those policies. Now let me tell you that yesterday, oh, and these also all go together, and that yesterday I was at one climate event where we were talking about transitioning and staying under the 2-degree scenario, and they had somebody from Chevron. And by the way, I live by a Chevron refinery over in Point Richmond, so I know way too much about Chevron, but I also know about what it's like to live there and to care for the children. So Chevron gets up and gives a song and dance that they all are giving, which is, hey, people want fossil fuels. We're just giving them the energy they need and demand. It's an essential part of their life. That's all we're doing. And so it's all laid on the demand side. There's no discussion of the supply side, except that, of course, on the supply side, all the big fossil fuel industries are quickly as they can, trying to get their reserves out of the ground and therefore into their assets and sold. And so you say, well, just a second, what about the carbon budget? You know, we have a carbon budget and you've got to keep a lot of this in the ground. But meanwhile, as we already know, they continue making investments that make no sense, that are financed by banks. And any economist who studies this will tell you, these are really stupid investments. They expect the return over a long period of time, and they're not going to get it. And so that question of why they keep doing it, it's like, when I talk to oil executives, they are just in another world. They truly don't think that they have to keep it in the ground or that they're going to get it out of the ground in time. And you keep talking about the carbon budget, and they say, well, they talk about silver bullets. Well, as an economist, one thing I can tell you is there are no silver bullets. And what I loved about the panel today is there are lots and lots and lots of policies we can be doing and should be doing. And we need to do it in 2 ways once again. We need to individually live mindfully and have a low carbon footprint and make sure our assets are not supporting fossil fuel. But we mainly need to get off the sofa and do what we're doing today, which is come together and work with a group. I work with 350 and Bay Area, and I work with Fossil Fuel California, which I love. And it is so fantastic when you work really hard on like SB 100. I can't tell you how many thousands of activists around California were dancing all over the place when Jerry Brown finally signed. And it is a big deal. It's historic. So my role actually is the final call to action. And so from a systems approach, we know that we don't want to support fossil fuels on the supply side, and that's where divestment comes in. When you're divesting, you're really reducing the supply of fossil fuels because you're making it too expensive. And you're really helping to keep it in the ground. And on the demand side, you have to really think about your own use as well as where you put your assets. That's part of it. But it's really important. One of your biggest assets we didn't talk about today, and that's your vehicle. And you really do need to go electric or to really stop using your car as much as possible to help create livable cities and get out there and really work with your communities to create efficient buildings, livable cities, take public transit. I take BART as much as I can, although I do have an EV with 100% clean energy. I'm so grateful for MCE. And here's another Chevron story. A wonderful use of Chevron land is a solar farm. And so it's totally polluted. They can never use this land for anything, except MCE got a really, really cheap rental price of the land and put up a gigantic solar farm. And so if you're ever driving around the Richmond Parkway by Chevron, look for it. It's the way we have to find a great use for land that's otherwise worthless and actually quite dangerous. But the solar farm doesn't care. And so let me just say, we know what to do. We know, thanks to the people today, how to do it, both from the elected officials all the way down to the engineer making new tools. Together, we can do it. Each and every one of us knows, just from the 30,000 people marching, that when we come together and we have all kinds of viewpoints, which is fine, we have all kinds of talents, it doesn't matter. There's no one silver bullet. All of us together can bring our talents, can work with each other, and create a new and caring economy that's clean, that's sustainable, that's livable. And you know what? It also makes people happier. So let me stop on that and just say thank you, Fossil Free California, and thank the city of Berkeley and the city of Seattle activists and everyone here, because I know that this is a lifetime commitment and a lifetime process, that may we continue the journey together. Thank you.
Yeah. Continuing on what Claire was saying, I really do want to say that, we've talked about how when you break up with your bank, you can go in and let them know why you're breaking up. The other thing that I really enjoyed was going in and saying, here's why I'm breaking up, and you need to know that I'm part of a movement and that I am working to get more and more people to break up as well. I'm talking to my neighbors, I'm talking to my friends, I'm talking to my colleagues, I'm talking to businesses to separate from you until you change your practices. So that's an important part of the discussion as well. Are there any major banks that are better than others? I work for a large government agency. We've researched options and have found that small credit unions can't provide the services we need in order for us to provide something to employees and vendors. And I think this is the kind of thing that the city of Berkeley is struggling with. It's one thing to say, yes, we want to separate, but the city of Berkeley has a large number of requirements that very few single banks can offer them. And this is one of the reasons that I know that there's a strong movement to support the public bank concept, and why the Public Bank of Oakland is so important. But does anyone want to take a stab at whether if the sort of do the least harm while still investing in a major bank that offers the services that a company thinks it needs?
Yeah, I can speak to that briefly. There's a bank, Bank of the West is owned by a French company, BNP Paribas. And Paribas has made some moves to cease investments in extreme fossil fuels. It isn't 100% clean, but it is beginning to bank, if you will, on cleaning up its image. It has a publicity campaign to that effect, and it's even getting some blowback from cities that rely on fossil fuels, and saying that they're going to pull their banking business if the bank's going to clean up its act. So Bank of the West is one example of a fairly sizable bank that could be a candidate. I know that the cities that study where they're going to put their their money, are faced with requirements, a need for security, a need for collateralization, and they have to have a fairly sizable bank. The city of Davis was successful in moving to River City Bank because their contract with Wells Fargo was up at that particular time, and River City Bank actively courted them. So if you establish a relationship with a bank that wants your business, then that'll help grease the way.
Can I add a thought or two to that? This is a huge challenge. I don't think it's a challenge for individuals who are free to move their money anywhere they like, but for cities and larger institutions, it is a challenge. And one thing I didn't get to in my talk was the city of Seattle passed an ordinance saying it's not going to bank with Wells Fargo. About 2 or 3 months ago, it came time to renew its contract, and not a single bank bid on its contract. And so Seattle had a clause in its contract with Wells Fargo that if it couldn't get another bank, its contract automatically rolled over. So Seattle will be banking with Wells Fargo for the next 3 years, which means that an additional $9 billion are going to cycle through Wells Fargo's accounts in the next 3 years, which I think speaks to the depth of the system change that we need to see, that our cities are so chained to Wall Street, irrespective of how unjust Wall Street's practices are. And we need to see real alternatives, which I know is why the public bank fights are so key. In Seattle, we've passed funding for a feasibility study that we expect to be completed in the next 2 weeks. A group of community activists are part of consulting with the consultant about that study, and I'm lucky to be one of them. But we need to be fighting for public banks, and just like say one thing about why fighting for public banks is so important in terms of the climate fight. Free market, fundamentalist capitalism, neoliberalism is completely incompatible with the sort of rapid action and regulation on carbon emissions that we need to see on climate. And we need to really, to use an unfortunately violent metaphor, strike for the heart of neoliberalism, and that's the financial sector. And there can be nothing I can think of that's more likely to shake the fundamentalist free market form of capitalism that we've lived under in this country since at least Reagan, than major city institutions funding, creating public banks. And that really starts to change our meta-narrative in our society in ways that make action on climate much more likely.
Can I just say something about? I just wanted to add that Berkeley also had a similar issue as Seattle. They put out the RFP, and I think they got a few hits, but they weren't able to move all the money due to all kinds of reasons, but they are moving a little bit, like credit cards and things like that, and unfortunately we did the same. We now have another 3-year contract with Wells Fargo, but we're also one of the cities investing in the public bank with Oakland and the other cities locally. Thank you.
The next question has to do a little bit about what we talked about. There are so many reasons to hate the big banks. It's hard to know which one to choose. Obviously, every one of us here in the room is focused on climate change in the environment and pipelines, et cetera. But someone pointed out that there are a number of divestment campaigns, not just the fossil fuel ones. Can you talk about the challenges in divesting from the war industry and the fossil fuel industry, focusing on differences, especially because the war industry is an expanding one. So this is something that Code Pink has really been involved in basically divesting from the war economy to a peace economy. I don't know if anybody else wants to talk about how partnering, all of these are interlocked, right? We've talked about sort of the intersectionality of this, but if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, As You Sow, which has provided fossil-free funds as a screening mechanism for finding out where your fossil fuel investments are, is also providing weapon-free funds. And it's based on data that will allow you to see whether, where and whether you're investing in weapons manufacturers. I think this phrase, knowledge is power, is really appropriate for bringing these wonderful data platforms to bear on your personal investments.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see, I see verticals, you know, we need to take sustainable investing from like a 2% adoption to 10% adoption, and then it's in our 401ks and everyone will have it. And in these verticals, there's climate, because this is very important, and there's guns. And guns resonates with a lot of people. And what I found was sustainable is that something's gonna bring you to it. It's not, the other one is gender equality or equality in general. And so whatever brings you to the party, when you end up in sustainable or responsible funds, they tend to be giving you all of these features. And it's just a question of connecting, well, what don't you want to own? Okay, you don't want to own guns. Are you okay with not owning fossil? Okay, and so you kind of get a resonant solution there. And
Okay.
I just wanted to say that we also have to remember not to invest in the prison industrial complex. So that's also very important.
Excuse me, I asked a question, and one of the reasons I asked it is that when you are talking about the government and war, not just handguns and stuff, there is a political climate that is so pro-war in this country that we can individually divest, but when we're asking institutions to divest, companies, like BlackRock and stuff, that's a whole different, that's a very different thing than fossil fuels. So I'm just wondering if you could address some of the challenges that you see in divesting from war that go beyond investing in other evil things.
I mean, what I can say is I've heard from someone in a more arcane divestment piece, which is BDS. And there are probably people in this room who are very violently opposed to BDS. So it's not kind of like a common progressive thing. And his message was, I can't get this through. I can't convince this university to care about this. But what I propose, what he proposes, is care about human rights. Put down general principles of what is appropriate, put down policies, and it's amazing how these government organizations and universities look at their policy and go execute. So you just have to put down policies. They don't like very specific things. It annoys them. It's hard for them to work with. Come up with, and that would be my suggestion.
Yes, I personally stand up for human rights everywhere. I stand up for Palestinian rights, and I feel their struggle is our struggle. It's all the same. So we all have to invest and divest and be aware of how all that is all intersectioned, and it's all related and one issue, the human rights issue.
I'm sorry to say that we've run out of time. There are a lot of really good questions here. We'll try to get answers on there, but in the meantime, a big round of applause for our panelists. And I'm going to actually quickly call Deborah Silvey up here. She'd like to make a brief statement, but Alec, can you also repeat your email for folks here?
Sure, it's Alec, ALEC, at 350seattle.org. Alec at 350seattle.org.
Hi, I'm Chair of Fossil Free California, and I just want to thank you all for coming this morning and thank the panel. Fossil Free California has put a lot of effort into this, but I especially wanted to thank Sandy Emerson because she's the one from Fossil Free who did this, and we have a special thanks for her. Thank you, Sandy, and thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in a little bit, I hope. Thank you.
Thanks again.